Merry Christmas, everybody. It's December 25th, 2019. 60 degrees outside here today. 60 flipping degrees. I love it. Actually, I don't know if I love it so much. I do like the idea of a white Christmas. Not very often do I have a white Christmas since we left Maine. I think once in Virginia, when we lived in Dayton, we had a white Christmas. 2004, something like that. That was pretty cool. I got some videotape of that actually. I gotta put off the VHS and put it onto a jump drive. Anyway, I'll never forget being from Maine. When my dad had first moved to DC area, we spent Christmas with him one time, and it was just like this. I was in shorts. We went to the University of Maryland football field, and I will never forget. My brother and I are throwing a football on the University of Maryland football field in shorts on Christmas Day. You know, being from a kid from Maine who had only left Maine one time, well, I guess twice. Once I was 5 years old, and I don't remember anything about that. The other time I went to California when I was like 10 or something like that. But anyway, it was like going to a whole new world, man. It was crazy. Because, you know, being from Maine, it's always cold up there. And it gets snowy and icy. Merry Christmas. And it was nuts. I'll never forget that. Global warming, I love you. Give me CO2 or give me death. All right, so a couple things. I'm reading my man Frederick Vitise's book where he talks about life expectancies. And I tell you, man, you gotta understand life expectancies as you're planning for your retirement. So everyone says, what's your risk tolerance? I.e., you're more conservative, you have more bonds. That's less upside, theoretically less downside. You're more aggressive, you have more stocks. That's fine. And we get a gauge of who you are as an investor, how much quote-unquote risk you want to take, as if you'll ever be able to gauge that before that time comes. When you're down the middle of a 55% drop in the S&P 500 from October 2007 to March of 2009, many people all of a sudden weren't very risk tolerant. Let's put it that way. It's easy to be risk tolerant when the market's going up. But everyone has this risk tolerance that they look at. What can I take for a level of risk relative to my returns I want to get? And it's very dependent on you, which I like. I like the fact that it's individualistic. Now, how they determine that is silly, based on some 7-question answer that you do on the line, or I think some firms have like 2-page questionnaire. I mean, all that stuff is very silly and subjective. But at the end of the day, hey, at least it gives you some gauge of who you are as an investor as you invest your money. The one thing that no one does, though, is life expectancy. Why is there no individual method to determine your life expectancy other than what some dude says? You know, and what I mean by that is like, oh, we expect you to live 90. Well, why do we think that? And you hear all the time, I say this all the time, life expectancy is 78. Well, no, it's not 78. If you are watching this video, your life expectancy is well beyond 78. 78 is for a newborn baby today. A new bouncing baby has a life expectancy of 78. That's not you, all right? So, life expectancy, A, we know it's not 78. B, we know it's beyond 78. C, we know your life expectancy is depending on how old you are right now. If you're 65 watching this, your life expectancy is longer in terms of when you're going to die than mine as a 49-year-old man. Does that make sense? Now, not many years you're going to live. I'll have more years ahead of me than you, but you'll live longer than I in terms of life expectancy for your age. That means your life expectancy at 65 today is probably 84 for a man, I'm thinking. Off the top of my head, I don't know, but 87 for a woman. My life expectancy for a 49-year-old guy is probably 81 for a man, 84 for a woman. So I will have more years yet to live, but you will have, in terms of your total life expectancy, more years of life, if that makes sense, because you're older. You've survived longer than I, thus you will survive longer than I in probabilities. Has nothing to do with you or me specifically, though. It just has to do with the fact that you survived till you're 65 and I've survived till I was 49. A guy who's 40 right now will have a lower life expectancy than me because he has not survived this long. And between 40 and 49, a certain amount of people will die, which is sad, but that's how it works. So anyway, my man Frederick pointed me to the calculator online, which I'm going to share with you in a different video, that you can use to actually input some more specific information about yourself. So I don't know if you remember when you got life insurance last, but when you do life insurance, you go through this thing called an underwriting process. And that simply means they look at you and say, look, they'll take your blood, urine sample, they'll ask you if your mom's got breast cancer, all that kind of stuff. They'll ask you all these various things about your health and your genetics, family history, do you smoke, do you skydive, the whole thing like that. And then they're going to rate you based on your life expectancy, specifically as an individual for that life insurance company. And if you smoke, if you're overweight, if you're taking blood medication, if you're taking this, you're taking that, if you freaking skydive without a parachute, ride a motorcycle without a helmet, you're more likely to die sooner than I. Thus, the insurance company has a lot more risk, and thus they're going to charge you more money for your premium. And what Frederick did, and I've done this now myself on this calculator, he looked at two different people. Everything about them was the same in terms of age. One guy smoked, one guy's overweight, one guy had diabetes, another guy exact same age, didn't smoke, wasn't overweight, didn't have diabetes. The guy who was subpar physically had a life expectancy until he was like 77 or something like that. Basically 10 years. Basically, there's a 20-year difference between the guy who was in good shape versus the guy who was in bad shape. I think they're both 60-year-old men, I think. I'll have to look back. It doesn't matter. I'm just trying to gauge that. One guy had a life expectancy till he's 70. Another guy had a life expectancy till he's 90. 20 years different. But if you just threw the average life expectancy in there, that would be 80. So both guys would say they're going to live until they're 80. So a conservative estimate for that would say the bad shaped guy, he'll live till he's 85. The good shaped guy, he'll live till he's 85 as well because their life expectancy is 80. And you're saying, well, we're going to give you 5 extra years of life expectancy. You want to make sure that we don't kill you off too soon and you run out of money. But the problem with that is it's meaningless. Because a bad shaped guy isn't going to live until he's 80, most likely. He's going to die well before he's 80, never mind 85. And so if you run financial plans with this guy basing his life expectancy until he's 85, you're going to have him way under consuming when he retires. Or way needing to spend more money or save more money until he retires and under consuming then. Does that make sense? So you're saying, hey guy, we have you live until you're 85, so you need to squirrel away more while you're working and spend less when you retire because we don't want you to run out of money. But actuality is the insurance company would say, no, we're underwriting him as if his life expectancy is 70. And what that means is that 50% of that population will die before they're 70 years old. Does that make sense? That's how the life expectancy works. They're saying, okay, when are we on not the precipice, on the down side of that statistical graph? So, you got 1,000 people, 50 or more will have died by the time this guy is 70 of that 1,000 people. Thus, his life expectancy is when that 50th person dies. And in this case, the 50th person dies at 70 years old. Thus, he has a life expectancy of 70. Because half the population has died at that certain age. And the interesting thing is when you look at the mortality tables, you see this huge number. Not many people die in the first couple of years. It gradually gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And then it maxes out roughly about the same age as life expectancy. And then again, a lot more people die between 70 and 75. So essentially by the time 76 rolls around, there's not that many people left alive. So from an insurance company perspective, they're like, look, we're going to be covered as long as our life expectancy numbers are pretty accurate. we're not going to be put up against the wall financially, have to pay out a bunch of life insurance that we didn't get enough premiums for. And so you'd want to give yourself some wiggle room. You say, okay, the life expectancy for this cohort who are, have diabetes, heavy, all that stuff is 70. I'm going to give myself 5 years wiggle room, assume my life expectancy is 75. And because of that, I'll make a plan for my financial planning to assume that I die at 75, if that makes sense. The other guy, on the other hand, the triathlete, well, he has a life expectancy of 90, all right? Now, he, again, is in good shape, no history of any illness in his family, doesn't smoke, blah, blah, blah. So he said, look, the life expectancy for my cohort is 90. So I'm going to give myself some wiggle room to 95 because, again, that means the 50th percentile or the 500th person of the 1,000-person cohort dies at 90, which means that is the majority of people are dead by the time we reach 90. Thus 90 is when the minority is still alive. And between 90 and 95, a significant amount of that who's left alive dies off. So I'm going to give myself a 5-year wiggle room. So significant differences here, because if both those guys use a life expectancy of 80, the one guy who's going to die early is going to save way too much, work way too long, and spend way too little on the front end of his retirement. The guy who's in good shape could do the exact opposite, because he's planning for a life expectancy of 80. According to his and the other guy's average life expectancy is 80. He said, I'll give myself some wiggle room to 85. That could be 10 years too short. Life expectancy is huge. So when I get back, I'll do a video on this calculator, because you got to know this. Now, it can also help you set goals too. For instance, you say, look, maybe I'm overweight. Let me go ahead and calculate this stuff honestly, almost like an insurance company would for underwriting. And I'll say, if my life expectancy is 72, and I'm 260 on a 5'9" frame, let's see what it looks like if I drop to 200. It's not going to be easy, but you'll see the drastic difference in how many more years you have. It's not just how many more years you have either, it's how many more years you have where you can actually do things. So you're not relying on people to push you through the airport and stuff like that. You can actually be self-sufficient. And that might give you the kick in the butt to get out there and change your diet in particular. Everyone talks about exercise. Change your diet is the most important thing. You can exercise all day long, but if you're eating crap when you get back, it doesn't mean anything. I think some guy was saying, Gary Taubes, who wrote Why We Get Fat, I think he said, you can ride, 10 miles on your bike, but then you come home and eat one Snickers, all the calories you burnt or whatever it was are gone, because that 10 miles of the Snickers is the equivalent of 10 miles on a bike or something like that. I forgot what it was. So you got, obviously exercise is good, but the diet is first. So you got to make sure you change your diet. Obviously, if you smoke, well, quit smoking. Look, I get it. Smoke is tough. I used to be there. My parents still smoke like chimneys. At some point, it's going to be tough. And you hear examples of people smoking into their 90s. They're the exception, not the rule. So don't use that as your a way to gauge your own retirement. That would not make sense. But anyway, at the end of the day, you gauge your own life expectancy based on the science that we have at hand today, not just some average number that some Joe's throwing in there like, oh, here's 65, the average life expectancy. I do this. So look, man, it's the easy way to do it. Say, all right, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, you're 65 years old today, you're married. The average life expectancy for one of you guys, for a husband, is, we'll say 87. Or no, what we'll say is there's a 50% chance one of y'all are going to live until you're 90. Well, that's just based on the population at whole. That's nothing to you specifically. And if we look at you specifically, it could change around your plan significantly. All right, so stay tuned. I've got some more stuff to talk about here, but I want to focus on life expectancy. And again, I'll do a video when I get home after I go for my walk, showing how this calculator works. All right, thanks.